Alright, we come to it, the final presentation of the day. The Wild West of ILL with Lisette, Scheer, Kristi, Krueger, and myself.
I'm first going to
Turn it on. Just
do the same thing as yesterday. Stand in between. So, does koha-US ILL module work? There's so many ways to answer that. Right now, it's a pretty complicated setup. You need a backend or a plugin, which most of the backends can be installed as plugins, but it's pretty complicated right now. And there's some other additional server-side stuff that also needs to be set up. The current plugins are koha-ILL, which lets koha libraries do interlibrary loan between them. INNReach, which is mostly what we're going to be talking about today. The freeform plugin, which is plugin for now, but is actually moving into the koha core hopefully soon. And there's other plugins available too. I know there's a bunch that like special libraries in Europe use a bunch of different ones. So, and each one functions differently and has separate configurations. This also makes testing ILL bugs really hard because the barrier of entry to test for any improvements is super high because you've got to know what plugin to get and where to download it and how to install it and be able to get on the command line to do everything. So we've made a lot of improvements though, and a lot of improvements are coming soon. And Pedro at PTFS Europe has been doing a lot of these. He's really involved in the ILLs. So in 2405, there were 7 new enhancements, which contributed to making all the ILL backends can be made into plugins now much more easily and installed with less work on the front end user side. So that's getting better. There's more bugs that need to happen to get rid of some of the other command line stuff, but this was a good first step or a few steps. They've also added some new filters on the table. So it'll search now. There's like an ILL request table, shows you all the requests. Right now it only searches what's visible on the table, but after the 2405 update, it's going to search all the, a bunch of the attributes as well. So if there's a barcode attribute and you scan the barcode in, it'll take you to the ILL request that matches that barcode, which is going to be really nice for some reasons I'm sure you'll see later. They've also added disclaimers, so if you're doing a ILL request that patrons can request from the OPEC, there can be different disclaimers set up. So if you're requesting an article, you can say here are the things you need to agree to get an article through ILL based on our policies, things like that. Right now there's just one. So if you have different policies for different item types, you have to have one really long disclaimer, basically, or link it out to somewhere else. They're also adding in batch requests, which just makes it easier for koha to do a lot if you're a library that has a lot of requests. They've also done a lot of work towards putting the freeform plugin into core, which would have, that would mean there would be a built-in ILL functionality. There's a lot of different things you can do with it and some things that you can't do yet, but is kind of next steps once it's in koha. And so that's going to be really nice because it's going to really lower the barrier for using ILL because it'll just be in every koha instance if you want to turn it on, but also for testing new bugs. So even if you're using another plugin like INNReach, being able to test for some of those bugs to move things forward faster will be really good. And one of the last big things is there's been a bunch of recent API additions and also plugin hook improvements. So that helps plugins be able to do more things, and more quickly. And we'll talk about some of those improvements that have happened with the INNReach plugin using those. One of the things that we've done is more options. When Cuyahoga was going through theirs, they are using the loading collection, and they wanted the rules to check if contribution was happening to follow the holding library. Before it was only the home library, because that's all that anybody had asked for. So we said, okay, we can do that. Tomas updated the plugin, we tested it, and we did that with a lot of different things just because we have Click and Blue Hills were like our only INNReach libraries before. And then Cuyahoga and Westlake were both came on this year, or like in the last year. And so that's like a pretty small sample of libraries. So it was pretty much built to work really well for Click at Blue Hills. And there's a lot of ways you can do things in Koha. So we added a lot more ways to set up rules. You can now not have contribution turned on if you have the rest of the plugin turned on, things like that, which also helps make testing a lot easier. And then the other exciting thing that we added was the check-in plugin hooks. We now, when you check in an item, instead of having to go, oh, this is an ILL item, it'll just check the item in and say, ah, the ILL has been received. And it'll go tell the central server, hey, we got this. So before you have to go and do, how many clicks was it, Kristi, when we were training you? Like 10?
Too many?
Yeah, way too many. Way too many clicks for every item that was coming in and every item that was going out. So we set up automation, so if you're sending out an item, pull it off your holds list, check it in, confirm the hold, and it prints out the slip to send to INNReach, checks the item out to the patron, and marks in INNReach that it's being shipped to the borrowing library. All of those were like extra clicks before. You had to go check it out manually. You had to go find the ILL request and mark it as shipped. So just taking out a lot of those steps, and we made all of them optional. So if the library doesn't want to do it automatically, they don't have to. And there's some other automation too that we've added in so that more recently, so like if somehow it doesn't get marked as checked out in Koha, but then it gets checked in the borrowing library, now it's going to tell us that and say, hey, this was checked in, you need to check it out, so it's not going to try and send it back to us when it comes back to you. So we've been doing a lot of just trying to clean up all of those steps. What's coming next for some future ILL changes in Koha? We've been doing a lot. I talked a little bit about the freeform plugin. And part of that is a very big very complicated, this is just a section of it, or a flow chart of all the things that they're gonna do. So this is like just adding in the freeform, but then there's a whole bunch more like automation that they wanna build in to Koha. So instead of like, our INNReach plugin does it all by APIs, basically. So like, we have to do API calls. And they want to just like build more of that into Koha and like hooks into Koha. So you don't have to necessarily use the API. And also just like make freeform be able to do a lot more. So maybe instead more people use freeform for like the staff interface part of it, even if they're using a different backend. So we're still waiting on the freeform plugin to get integrated. That's like 35570 if you're interested in it. We're hoping to get it in for 2405, but then lots of other things happen with especially the cross-site request forgery, CSRF, overhaul, kind of push this to the back burner because we had to get that all done at once. So, but that'll really simplify things once that's in core. Lisette. You have to.
Whew. Okay, so I'm going to be talking about our journey at our library. We migrated to Koha just under a year ago, so a lot of this is going to talk about when after our migration, getting us onto INNReach again. So all this is pretty fresh still. So a little bit about our library. Sorry, this microphone's going to go. We are a popular materials library, and what that means for us is a lot of our items are weeded within 5 years, so things just are not on the shelf anymore within 5 years. So what this ends up meaning is that if we have customers who are looking for items that are older than 5 years or that are out of print, we're going to need to rely on interlibrary loan to get those materials for them. We have 27 branches and over 490,000 card holders. And I mention that because that just means we have a lot of requests going through interlibrary loan. I took some data from Koha from June, and we borrowed 9,189 items through interlibrary loan. We lent about 949 items, so that's still a lot, but that's like a tenth of what we borrowed. Our customers love their stuff. So where are we borrowing all this stuff from? Our library participates in 2 interlibrary loan programs using INNReach. They both use INNReach. Search Ohio is the state's public library interlibrary loan network, and Ohio Link is the state's academic library network. And you just always have to give Ohio a thumbs up for working the state outline into logos. So because there are the 2 different networks, we were the first system that ByWater worked with that needed to get onto 2 networks using INNReach. So that added another layer of complexity. So to dig deeper into some of the numbers, we really needed to get back on. So, all right, I should back up. Because we migrated, we had to exit from the interlibrary loan networks. So that meant for a period of time, until we could get everything sorted out, we were not going to be able to borrow or lend anything on either Search Ohio or Ohio Link. So in June, we had 8,960 borrows from Search Ohio. We borrowed 229 things from Ohio Link. On the other side, we lent 943 to Search Ohio. We lent 6 to Ohio Link. I think we would normally lend more, but it's summer break for colleges, so we just didn't have that much circulation going there. But I'm putting all these numbers out here because any blackout period without that ILL is going to be a hurt for our patrons. So we prioritized how we wanted to go back on. So we were like, we need to get back on borrowing on Search Ohio first. Then we need to get back on lending on Search Ohio. And then once you get that figured out, you can get back onto Ohio Link with borrowing and lending at the same time. So when we went to ByWater, we stressed that we needed the ILL plugin to handle both complexity and volume. So getting there. One does not simply walk into an ILL system. So we had to put together, we worked with Lisette from ByWater, and just can't say enough good things about Lisette and Tomas from, oh boy, Tech Solutions. Somebody please correct me if I have Tomas's company name incorrect. Then on the CCPL side, we had a lot of internal stakeholders, our technical service director, our catalog and processing manager, Lori in the back, our CERC manager, our IT director, one of our branch directors, me, and our user experience manager, who did a lot of the Aspen configuration for interlibrary loan. And I'm not going to talk about Aspen so much here, but if you're curious about how that ended up going, I'm happy to put you in touch with Joe. He did some really cool stuff. So you might be like, why did they have so many people from their library in this process? And it's because we don't have an ILL person, a dedicated ILL staff. All these almost 10,000 transactions plus are getting handled by our CERC staff in the branch. The holds are getting placed by our reference librarians sometimes. And then as we see when we take a look at how this ends up getting configured in Koha, it touches catalog, it touches your CERC rules, it touches your item types. So just there were a lot of different rules adjacent to ILL that needed to be consulted. And also because we were using INNReach, the III Innovative Interfaces is the vendor that runs INNReach. So we had two key contacts there that we met with weekly to discuss the requirements for the mic, for getting back on, assigning homework, so getting all the configuration ready to go, and then testing and troubleshooting errors during these meetings. So how this ended up working out was a lot of configuration. So if you see up there on the slide, these are the item types that we ended up having to set up specifically for interlibrary loan. And you can see that there's Search Ohio, and then there's Ohio Link, and then each type of thing that we borrow from those platforms gets its own item type. And that has to do with circulation rules. You'll see that one thing that's cool is we have a check-in message set up on those so that when our CERC staff see these things come back in, it gets a little note that says, you got it, this isn't ours, send it back. The other thing that we did here was we used parent item types, which is kind of cool because even though they're two networks, there's a checkout limit between the two. So you can only have out at a time a certain, like a combined total between Search Ohio and Ohio Link. So we use parent item types to enforce that. So now that you've got your item types, you've got to set up your CERC rules for those item types. And so our lending policies are different from both of these lending networks. Search Ohio and Ohio Link have a shorter lending period for DVDs. There's a 7 days, ours is 21, so we have to work that in. And they also get fewer renewals. So we have to code that into our CERC matrix. Plus Ohio Link's items get more renewals than Search Ohio's. So that's why there's many more item types. Well, and finally, the ILL items are pretty much one of the few things that we circulate that actually have overdue fees, so that had to go into the CERC matrix as well. So fast forward through a lot of testing, thanks again. And this is kind of where, so you have like, it's almost like it looks like a module. You click into ILL from the home screen and it takes you to a portal where you can see all of your requests, all of your transactions that are out there. And some of the things that I like about it are being able to click into the request ID and see more details about the request. And this is a fake patron that we use we don't actually know someone named Tester Search Ohio, but if you click into that, it'll take you to the patron record too, so you can kind of get more information if you need it from there. Okay, so this is just the commerce side. If you filter it to get your lending, really the only difference is here is that you're going to see that the patron isn't a patron, it's the institution that's borrowing the item. If you click into that institution name, it'll take you to a patron account page where you can see everything out to that system at the time. And it looks just like any other patron record. And finally, you can see there's a link for the bibliographic record ID. So here's what one of those individual requests looks like. If I find a row in the ILL portal and click on the request ID, that Manage ILL request window that you see in the back comes up, and you can see item agency code. That's going to be the institution that's sending it to us. And you can see the status. So this is a brand new request. So it has a status of requested owning library, and you can track that status throughout the request cycle. So when you make a request and the owning library marks the item as shipped to borrowing library, at that point, Koha will make a temporary bid record for the item. This is what that looks like. So you can see that item type for Search Ohio. And you also see that barcode. That should be a clue that that's even if you didn't see that, you'd be like, we don't use barcodes like that. And it says additional processing required ILL. The other thing it will let you do is see that up there at the top it says opaque view, which means it's suppressed for us, that would be Aspen Discovery. That's important because we don't own this. This isn't our stuff. We don't want our customers looking through the catalog, seeing that, putting a hold on it, and then being crushed when it doesn't come in. They can still request it. It just has to go through Search Ohio or Ohio Link. So from a patron's record, there's an ILL request history status. You can see the things that they've asked for. You can also, while the request is live, if there's a bid record, you can look at it in the holds history too. So you could click into the bid record from there, but once the patron returns the item, that bid record is gone. So all you're going to see when you look in the holds history is no bibliographic record. Oh, I should say, oops. This separate holds history is a 24/5 feature. So that's coming, I think currently right now, it's just reading history or borrowing history. So what we have, ultimately you'll be able to just see a holds history. So that's where this view will be. And you're probably like, oh, that looks great, but I don't really know how this all comes together. Don't worry, I got you, fam. I made charts. So how it ends up going is one of our patrons goes into either our catalog and searches, can't find it. They find a referral link to Search Ohio and Ohio Link, or they go straight to Search Ohio or Ohio Link's catalog, their unique catalog. And they find what they want. They request it through the portal. And at that time, an ILL request is created in Koha. So that's that manage ILL request in those rows that were in that portal. Next thing that happens is the owning library sends the item. So they check it out to us. A bid record is created in our instance of Koha. And then the status on that manage ILL request screen changes to item shipped by owning library. So this goes through a state courier service. It comes to us. We check it in at our library and automatically the hold is trapped. So it's like trapping hold. And a hold filled notice goes out to our patron. So that's key too, because if they don't know it's coming, they're never going to pick it up. Then the status changes to received and the patron can check out the title like any other item. And I put magic there because this is some of that automation that Lisette was talking about. There used to be, when we first started doing that, you had to hit a receive step. Now you check it in, hold track, it's marked received, and that's great. Because we have a few hundred branch staff. And the fewer clicks and the fewer steps, the better. So then it gets checked back in at CCPL when our patron is done with it. And when we check it in, that bid record gets cleared from our catalog and the item is set as in transit to owning library. And when it gets to the owning library, they check it in and that transaction is closed out with a checked in at owning library. Lending process, a little simpler. When the request is made, we get that ILL request in our portal. Then that ILL request shows up on a branch's holds queue. So they pull it. There's not a separate ILL holds queue. It just gets incorporated into the rest of the branch's holds queue for the day. So their pages pull the copy from the shelf. We check it in and the status gets checked, updated to ship to owning library, and it gets checked out to that institution's account at the same time. So that in transit to borrowing library step also automated. Magic. And it goes all through the statewide courier. So when it comes back to us, we check it in and that status just gets changed to checked in at owning library. One really cool thing that Lisette worked with us to get configured is that when they're trapping these holds, normally we have just for our holds that are just staying in the system, there's a sticky one-up label that goes around the book. For interlibrary loan, the standard has been to print out an 8.5 by 11 paging slip that gets folded up and tucked with the item when it goes into the courier. So Lisette worked with us to get this so that it prints this way, and so that also when we're scanning the holds, Koha knows which one of these we're doing, whether it's interlibrary loan or staying in, so the right thing prints. That's great. However, there's always a wish list slide at the end of these. Some of the things that we would like to see yet, and I just do have to say that, like, we've been back on borrowing since September of last year, and given the sheer number of things that we're taking out and lending every month, this is going extremely well for us. Things we'd still like to see, we'd like patrons to cancel a request from their own account in Aspen Discovery. Right now, there's not really a ideal way to do that, so we're looking to do that still. I did mention Aspen, but just this once. We'd like to see more distinction between requests that are coming from different networks. So we'd like to see at a glance, this Search Ohio, this is Ohio Link. It would also be nice to be able to see, this is Lens, this is Borrows. Right now they're all together and you kind of have to filter that view. We'd like to have it so that if a check-in is missed, so if our staff forgets to check something in before dropping it off to the owning library, right now that item just kind of gets stuck on our patron card and the record's hanging out in our catalog. Even so, if some way the owning library checks in their item and it clears out for us, that would be wonderful. We also would like a way to manually decontribute items from the union catalogs for these services for Search Ohio. Because right now, if the status of something is a little bit off and there's a glitch, it's a little tricky to get that refreshed, to get that pushed through. We'd like to be able to block suspended holds on ILL requests because once the request comes through and it gets a bib, it shows up as a hold on the patron record. So if you're not very savvy about how the difference between ILL holds and standard holds, you might be tempted to be like, yeah, I can suspend that for you. You can pick it up anytime. But the owning library is going to get their request and they're not going to suspend it for you. So turning that off would be great, specifically for ILL holds. And finally, it would be great to view the title information on patron accounts after the bid has been removed. So that was that no bibliographic row that we saw earlier. We have funded a bug 30648 for this, so we're eagerly waiting to see that come live. You're wondering why there's a picture on this slide, and it's just a snippet from Aspen to show like how we've worked around the not allowing patrons to cancel holds through there. So we're asking them to contact the branch to do that. With that, I will turn it over to Bob.
One of the great things about doing my slides last was Kristi got all those screenshots and explained the whole process. So now all I have to do is just explain kind of how we're a little bit different. So first, Prospector is now officially our statewide ILL. It is run by the Alliance, which started at, well, it is still just, it is not actually the Rebel Alliance. I didn't find a logo for them. I thought it was more amusing to do that. They're an alliance of the major research universities in the state, and somehow they have got this thing going, sharing amongst themselves that is now statewide. And part of that is we had another ILL project called SWIFT that our Colorado State Library works with. And I said replace, but it's more like they melded together. SWIFT used to use VDX, which was an old OCLC thing that they were stopping to support. And fortunately, we had a place to latch onto so we could continue to get lending between small rural libraries and libraries in that had larger systems and access to these major universities, which have a lot in their collections that you wouldn't find in a small Colorado town. So initially, the only way to do this was this thing called a resource sharing broker, which I'm assuming you never had to deal with. Okay. So it's basically the stripped down version of Millennium that you have to run as another piece of software in addition to the ILS you're running. So that was really inconvenient because you're running two different systems essentially. So trying to bring this together in Koha was a huge thing that we wanted to accomplish. And then now we did all this project with our public libraries and our community colleges that are part of our consortium. We have Colorado Department of Corrections libraries that are on a separate server for security reasons. So now we're working on getting them underway. So we do a lot less volume than Cuyahoga, not surprisingly. We have 55 total branches lending. It's limited to those public libraries and the community colleges. So schools aren't eligible for this. Although there's kind of a workaround you can do if there's a public library in the town, if they want to do that, where they can do it through them, but they can't do it directly. But I was a little interested in learning how much more these small libraries are sending out than they are borrowing, which I don't think anybody before this presentation had thought to look at the statistics of that. And that needs to be something that just tells me we need to do a better job of promoting this service, because right now it doesn't make sense for us to be supplying these larger, more well-funded institutions with our books instead of the other way around. That's not quite how we want it. Now, we've been ranked as like kind of the last priority our libraries have to try to reduce this kind of scenario, but if it doesn't get promoted, it's not going to get used. So when we started the project, we did 5 pilot libraries, and at that point, Andrew was with ByWater and really helped us out a lot. And then Andrew wasn't with ByWater, so that was one of our like, oh, we can't go wider with this because nobody is at ByWater is really in charge of this project. There was Tomas, but he's a developer and not a support person and has a separate company. So we patiently waited, and then a solution presented itself in Lisette, and that was one of our big holdups. We also had some issues with how ILL transactions loaded or were viewed in that big table that Kristi showed. The way they were loading before is it was taking a long time, and every single transaction added to that table, and thus it was taking longer and longer every day, a little bit longer. And that was only with 5 libraries, so we knew if we went live with a wider amount, that wasn't going to work. But that was able to load in a more efficient way. So that allowed, those 2 things allowed us to go forward. And during our process, it seemed like we were having, this is not accurate, but it felt this way, that we were having weekly meetings that started as far back as I could remember, and I'll never get away from them because now I'm doing them again with the Colorado Department of Corrections project. But that got a lot of stuff all worked out. So a couple of differences between Astrocat and Cuyahoga. We have it simple. We only do 2 item types. So we have a 21-day checkout and I think I put a 14-day checkout. I think it is actually a 7-day checkout. And that has a certain rule of just 1 renewal. So that makes things a lot easier to manage on our end. We do have a different paging slip. So what you see on the right, we started with just our standard Colorado courier slip. So that's what gets printed out. But libraries because it's a it's just a mash of all sorts of different systems. And some of the libraries in Colorado are Sierra libraries, and they can get all this information easy. And some are using this resource sharing broker, which uses Millennium. They don't have access to like know who sent the book or who the patron is for. So they asked us to create a little paging slip at the bottom. So we've done that as well to include. So hopefully the idea being that you scan, you print, tells you where to send it. You don't have to look anything up. And then you can include that information as well. So that's helpful for the library receiving it. Some of our libraries, we decided to go to lend only. We started with everybody lending and borrowing, but due to the nature of Colorado being a very large state with mountains, our courier service is not equitable in what we can offer everybody. So we have some libraries that basically have to drive sometimes an hour away to a larger city that's on the courier route to pick up and drop off stuff. That adding this additional work of filling these holes wasn't good for anybody because they were getting overloaded and stuff instead of getting filled by another library faster was waiting until the next time they could make that run. And they can't just increase the amount of times they drive an hour away. That's not going to work. They can only do it when they can do it. And they aim for weekly. So we just decided, let's just make it easy and we'll just drop their lending from there. And then I mentioned again, we only have one system, which is good. So one ILL system makes it a lot easier. So some of our current challenges, we don't right now receive any data from the library, from the requesting libraries, no, from the borrowing libraries, what their code is. So we can't create that same courier slip that we did before. They just have to look at the book that they're returning, figure out what the library is, and then fill it out manually. So that would be great if the prospector system could provide that information so we can automate that process as well. We also have an issue where that apparently I heard, and Chip left, but he was talking to some of my staff in the back there, that there's a reprint button for a courier slip that I'm excited to look into, because what happens with the automation, which has sped up a lot of things, is when you check something in and it triggers that hold, if you don't print that slip right away, it's already on to the next step. So it won't just print that slip again. So having a way to reprint that slip if somebody messes up would be really awesome. Sometimes our data gets out of sync. In fact, Lisette was like, hey, did you do something to your configuration file? I said, no. I said, well, there's a bunch of errors and stuff's getting out of sync, but it stopped. So that was good. It stopped and cut off. But we had a situation where there was a few days, like maybe a week or two, where it wasn't working at all. And so everything got backed up and then it had to get caught up again. So that happens periodically. We would like to be able to force a status update on occasion. Maybe it's because of that lack of syncing, where it's like, no, this isn't received, it's to the next step. Right now, we can't do that. INNReach very much wants to do things sequentially, and it doesn't want to ever skip a step. And so that's kind of a limiting factor when there's these weird situations. Reporting of stats could be improved. We have some reports we've written and you can do it. It would be nicer if maybe it was within the module and it'd be a little easier to pull up those stats instead of writing a few different reports and then figuring that out. Although if some people write these super complex reports, as we've seen earlier today, that maybe that would solve all my problems. I just don't know how to do it. I don't think Andrew or Sarah are going to do it for me. So no, I'm getting the head shake. And then, why do I have a picture of a field of dreams? This is what I call field of dreams marketing, where if you build it, they will come. That doesn't work in marketing. And a lot of our libraries try that approach because they're small libraries. They're not staffed with marketing experts or people who have the time to do a lot of marketing, but trying to help them figure out ways to actually promote this really awesome resource is something we should try to invest some time in, because it is really cool, and it's just sad to see that it's not being utilized as much as it could be. But there's a twist, and that is we're gonna blow this all up, because I was informed recently that we are moving to not out of INNReach into something called OpenRS. And if you're wondering why there's a picture of Sylvester Stallone, there's a very silly action movie called Demolition Man from many years ago. And that's just immediately what I thought of when I thought of lots of explosions happening to the INNReach infrastructure and then being replaced with this new thing. So that's going to be a real interesting project. OpenRS is something that has a common ancestor with Project Reshare, which is open source, which is good. So that's a thing to be excited about, that I'm looking forward to, particularly since, and nothing against INNReach, it's an older proprietary software. It has limitations. I don't think they're going to make a ton of changes. All the changes that we've had and improvements have come on the Koha plugin side of things, and that's to be expected. So hopefully moving to something open source will provide more of that collaborative openness that's in the name. So at some point, we're going to get a test database. Lisette asked me, do you know when that's going to happen? I said, no, I don't. So hopefully we'll find out soon. When we were initially finding out that there was going to be this move, I was told, well, we're either going to do it this year or next year, but we're going to get the test database later this year. And I was like, there might be a significant amount of work done to reconfigure this plugin to work on a completely new system. So, we might need to talk about your very general plan of just kind of flipping the switch and moving this over. This is not going to work. Like, we need to let ByWater know and give them time to do things, or else it won't be ready when you want it to be. So details on this project and when we're moving are fairly unclear at this part, but hopefully will become clear sooner. And yeah, like I said, this is going to be a huge rework. Hopefully, as all these new features are coming in, because one of the things I was really excited when Cuyahoga was joining was like, good, they're going to say, we want all this stuff and we're going to pay for it. And then we're going to benefit from it. I hope that's still the case. Hopefully a lot of these features that are coming in are INNReach specific always, and something we can at least build on, even though we're no longer sharing, going to share the same software that we're connecting with. And in the short term, this feels like it's going to be a bit of a mess, but in the long term, I think there's a huge opportunity here for a lot of improvements. And then hopefully, at a future koha-US conference, there'll be other people that are using open source ILL software and presenting about that and talking about how nicely and seamlessly it integrates with Koha, just like we had a presentation with Aspen Discovery doing that earlier. So that would be a best case scenario, and I would love to see that. And then finally, so our presentation is over. We're going to take some questions if you have them. Andrew's our new mic jockey.
I have a couple questions for Kristi. You said that your item info is deleted from the holds history after the item's checked in. Does it stay under ILL requests, or is that more like a patron suggestion?
It's you. I will. Sorry. Sorry. Hear the gears grinding in my brain. Let me think. So the ILL part of it, I believe it's, so it's not gonna be in your ILL history anymore. It's going to drop out, I believe.
There's a system preference for which fields are hidden by ILL. And, Cuyahoga has it set up, so once it's referred to the in library, it's hidden. And so that doesn't show up either in the big table or the patron history. There is a bug to split those into two different preferences because it would be nice to be able to see the patron history. But right now it's just one preference, and that table gets unwieldy really fast if you don't have anything in there, especially if you're limited as much as Cuyahoga does.
My other question was, do you use tracking numbers for your courier items?
As far as I know, no, they get, it's a courier specific for the library, so it's not like we're using DHL or FedEx or anything like that. So it gets, like a sticker on it that says Search Ohio or Ohio Link. Or, yeah, Lori has a Search Ohio item right now that, has that sticker on it, but it's not that complex, I don't believe.
You know, we've looked at what it would cost to do more tracking in courier, and it is just cost prohibitive. It would explode to make it like, like a FedEx or something like that. It would just explode the cost of it. So we decided to not do that.
Were these cert rules you had to upload those ahead of time to match what's in Search Ohio? Did you have to also front load the libraries as users, the library systems as users to have them be placed under there?
No, those got automatically created. We did have to add those cert rules to, and again, for us, it was just 2, so it wasn't that bad. We had it for 55 libraries, setting up 2 cert rules isn't too bad, but I'm sure that was less fun for you. You didn't do it.
No, I did the cert rules, so Lisette, I think, could probably speak to this better, but you do have to like do some configuration so that the plugin gets all of those things synced up with the central server or through INNReach that INNReach uses to manage all these.
Yeah, so there's like a couple of cron jobs that once the plugin is all set up, you start running, that one of them pulls all the branches, and that runs nightly now, so if it changes, we don't have problems like we used to. It used to be if like someone moved systems and their code changed and nobody told us that we needed to rerun the thing, then we'd start getting ILO requests that were like throwing 500 errors when they were checked in because they were like, that patron doesn't exist. Where's it coming from? Or where's it going to? So that runs like nightly now. And also we have a cron job that just updates like our branches, like the branches from the koha side, and make sure that they're correct in Search Ohio or whatever central server.
And Lisette and I were just doing a little setup of that for the CDOC libraries during Andrew's presentation. Sorry, Andrew.
I think my question is for Lisette. So my state uses Scheer from Autographics, which is like, yes, thank you. It would have been rude if I said it. Is anybody using that plugin? Because I found it on ByWater's site, but I don't know whether to be excited or not.
I did not know there was a Scheer plugin.
No.
I don't think anyone's using it. I think right now we mostly use NSIP for Scheer. That sounds right.
Yeah.
And yesterday at lunch, yesterday at lunch we were talking about that and about how, hey, it would be great if we had an NSIP plugin because right now it's kind of a black box. Where like some of the configuration at least should be done on the front end. Maybe some of the like log information could be exposed or something. I don't know. I have to talk to the developers about it, other developers about it, but it's on my list for our meeting on Tuesday. So hopefully we might have.
I'll be curious how that goes, because I mean, we're getting enough libraries in New Hampshire that it might get traction, but I think there's just enough bugginess in autographics that I don't know. I know I'm not going to try to push it, but I kind of want to follow it.
Yeah.
How many people are using ILL and Koha right now? Okay, couple. Hopefully you learned something.
So I have a question for Lisette. So a lot of, we talked about doing koha ILL in Kansas because we've got so many consortia, and it sounds like a lot of the stuff you built into INNReach is what we're waiting for, the automation piece. So I'm just wondering what's the status on the koha ILL?
So that one, we actually have a partner right now who has a test server who's working on setting up some testing to help us figure out what all needs to be done. Like I met with a bunch of the folks from Kansas earlier this year, and we talked about like what was missing in it for them. And this is just like another library that's pretty involved, that's interested in it, and they're also gonna be able to look at some of the like user interface stuff. I didn't get into it, but the configuration for INNReach is a YAML file, which is yet another markup language. And you have to be very specific about the spacing and the formatting on it. That's why I asked Bob if he changed anything, was just because like, if you do something wrong, which is very easy to do, it can break the entire configuration file. And I always ask before I start digging too far into it, because sometimes someone did change something, and then we know where to start. That's easier to fix than like question mark. But this person is also hopefully going to be able to give us some tips on building a configuration page that can actually be used by library staff and can pull in like all the item types and stuff, and you can just say, hey, these are the item types in Koha, and these are the item type that they are going to be in Search Ohio. As like, that all has to be done as like YAML plain text right now. When we were starting Cuyahoga, I was brand new to doing INNReach, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is a mess. I'm gonna mess it up so many times. So I made a Google sheet where I put in all of their item types and patron types and central item types and central patron types. Did I say that? Maybe. It's Friday afternoon. Friday afternoon before we come. It's Friday. And basically made it into like a form for Kristi to fill out, where she could select the things and then it built the YAML file for me, so I didn't have to build all the spacing every time. But it would be much better if we could build it into Koha. Especially for updates, like when we added all the libraries to click or for Prospector. Like it would have been great if we could have just gone into Koha and said, okay, these ones are all ended now. So that's part of what we're hoping for with this, and then hopefully gonna start work. The plan was later this year, but I'm not sure that that's still the plan. But hopefully soon on some updates to the Koha plugin.
So yeah, so we can achieve Koha world domination at some point. We just have to figure out how the courier is gonna work in the world with everybody.
You can start with Kansas and Idaho, because both of those have a lot of state, like all the big consortiums in Idaho, and what is it now, 4 of the big consortium in Kansas, 5?
4 and a
4 and a small one.
Yeah, they go live in October.
So my question is, so we have looked at the ILL module a bit, a year or two ago. And I know things have changed since then, but when we were initially looking at it, we were looking at the free form because, me being somebody that isn't involved in ILL, I had to go ask questions, and there were only certain people I knew that dealt with ILL, and so my knowledge and my resources were extremely limited. How do you suggest talking with the consortium, or at least the libraries that are dealing with the ILL, that how do you suggest talking to them and figuring out whether or not using the module is a good fit and if it'll work for them. Especially, I know that right now that, you know, some libraries handle ILL a little different than other libraries, and that's always the thing, especially in a consortium, trying to bring everybody together and set something up that will work for everybody's workflow. But I think the onboarding of that is a little challenging, but you know, this is kind of why I developed something off to the side through jQuery and through Holds that we could do that individual libraries that wanted to use it could, and it didn't disrupt their workflow too much. You know, they could still do what they wanted to do, or they use this mechanism, and it helped a little bit. But how would you suggest getting libraries more involved in the ILL module?
I think one great place to start with that would be that the international mailing list were the mattermost, because there are a lot of European libraries that are using it. That's part of why FINRA PTFS0 has been doing so much development, is because they actually, you know, I mentioned there are some other plugins that are more specialized, and they have like 5 that are for like medical libraries in Finland and things like that. And so they're like really specific, but there are a lot of users out there. Because most of the users that I know much about are up here with me and then Chip earlier. Like, I know there are other people using the module with freeform. Maybe a couple other people using custom plugins, but they're not who I talk to very much. We've done some testing with libraries with the koha-US, but like Jason mentioned earlier, it needs work. It's pretty basic. So probably the international community would be a really good place to start, because I know that there's like a larger percentage of koha libraries using it internationally.
I'm also trying to remember, and I think this was asked before, and maybe I know the answer to this. I haven't heard much reference to OCLC in their aspect of it, or not OCLC, WorldCat, excuse me. Does WorldCat have any APIs? Is there any plans to do that, or is it something proprietary that they're trying to keep in their own island kind of thing?
Our APIs, I think, I'm not 100% sure. I think we might actually have some instant partners with them. I'm not 100% sure, but we've at least talked to some people about it. And I know that we have a lot more that we're doing with the NSIP that either doesn't do much with the ILL module, or I guess anyone here who has like, I forget your name because I don't have my glasses on, but we were talking earlier about NSIP a little bit. Yeah. Sarah. Oh yeah, I don't have my glasses on, so I'm like, I think that might be Sarah. But do you guys use the ILL module as part of it? Okay. Some of the NSIP setups do a little bit, but it's mostly they don't. And I believe he has some OCLC NSIP connections. Probably. And one thing I wanted to mention too is that the reprint slips that Bob was talking about, I could have sworn we had a meeting about that, but that's using the templates. Oh, that's why we don't have it yet, is because you're not on that. That's why.
I'm not on that version.
You're not on that version.
So do that for us.
Cuyahoga and Wesley was on that version, on a newer version. So, because they went live. But we use the new templates thing that Jason presented out and a report. And the template is just the same as the whole slip template, just the part that you need. And with the template toolkit replaced with the new like data call the report. So that's how that's like the main use I've had that is helping Cuyahoga and Wesley set that up. And then Chip added like a jQuery button to the table so that you can just reprint from there.
Can't wait for those things.
Yeah.
All right, thanks to my co-presenters. I applaud you.